Hi, and welcome to the Risk and Resilience Insight interviews. I'm Grant Kennedy, and today I have Philip Allan joining us. So welcome, Philip. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
No problem. So I think we'll start off with, we do know each other pretty well. The foot is in the other shoe, so to speak. I think I did the very first webinar for the IRM when you were Director of Learning there. So it's a bit different interview. Normally it's me on the other side of things. So today we want to find out and get your expertise and learning and knowledge in the corporate environment. So no better place to start than you with your experience and everywhere you've worked. So maybe just if you start off with giving us a bit of a background for all the listeners, and then we'll go into the few questions that we've got. So over to you, Philip.
Yeah, thanks, Grant, and delighted to be invited to this podcast. Yeah, I've had a varied career doing learning roles in many different organisations, especially trade associations in financial services. So as you mentioned, yes, I was Director of Learning at IRM, some good few years that I had there. Moved on to the British Bankers Association and UK Finance, where I was Director of Learning, and at PIMFA, we represent the wealth management firms in the UK, and I'm head of learning there. So yes, lots of fingers in different pies, an exponent and an expert in getting things wrong as well as getting things right in the learning field.
Good, and it's I suppose trial and error is always the way that it works. And I think your knowledge and experience, me being a risk manager, that's when I first get introduced to you, and you probably work with hundreds, if not thousands, of CROs and heads of HR, directors of HR. So that's what we want to really try and explore today. Your wealth of experience and some insights into how people can learn, how they can do things better. So before we get into the core questions we're going to ask, it's really important always for us is to get an insight into you. So we just start with what's the riskiest thing that you've ever done and what makes you resilient?
Okay, riskiest thing I've ever done. I think that riskiest thing was probably deciding whether to save a person from drowning on a holiday whilst I was out training for a triathlon in Portugal, or whether I should turn back and just ignore their pleas or their screams. So suffice to say, both of us survived, although I think she probably saved me at the end more than I saved her. But that was the riskiest thing. And I think that what makes me resilient? Oh gosh, 2 kids. 2 kids, yes. And I would say it's my faith in God. So that's what makes me resilient. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So let's move on to the core areas that you wanted to talk about. So how has risk learning evolved in the last 10 to 15 years?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. So we've gone from the one and done, tick box compliance, risk management approach to learning, where you're just getting presented in front of e-learning modules and you have to do them, and then it's tick that box and you get scored on your completion ratios. So we've gone from that as well as to fast tracking on onboarding individuals at the start of their careers in risk management, in compliance or financial crime. And I think that we've now evolved into actually making sure that learning is bespoke to the individual job role. We've actually done it in a way that suits them through micro learning, through short format learning, through engaging activities, which is learning by doing, rather than just presenting people with a set of rules or examinations to actually check what they can remember. It's much more about application and implementation.
Good. Now, if you can think back that far, 10, 15 years, can you remember the types of organisations, not necessarily the companies themselves, but the types of organisations that were leading in that and how they slowly, incrementally evolved over that period of time, and who's been doing it well?
Without naming names specifically, but I think that certainly if you segmented the marketplace and said who's done learning really well, there's no doubt about it. The disruptors in the marketplace, any marketplace. So look at the Airbnbs, the Googles of the world have really taken learning to the next stage. And this remember was pre-COVID. And then you have certainly some of the business schools, so the likes of Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard and Wharton. Those were real cutting edge. And what they've done is that they've taken learning and ripped it apart. Again, pre-COVID, ripped it apart and actually said, well, look, how do we develop our leaders? How do we build a more resilient and robust organization and develop the cultures within those by actually learning best practices and good practices from other organizations? So literally visiting those organizations, seeing how the likes of Amazon, Airbnb, and Santander and Barclays are doing these things, taking those ideas, implementing in them and embedding them within their organizations. That's what leaders are now looking for in terms of like their experience and understanding of what good looks like in the marketplace.
Good, because I suppose risk management in some ways has got more complex in the world and environment that we work in. So in today's global economy, the environment of risk has become even more complex. And I suppose what some regulators call it is an ecosystem. So there's dependencies everywhere. There's that you have to think about your internal control environment, your external control environment. There's a lot of things going on that risk managers have to manage, to be able to train their champions, to be able to train the wider environment, to be able to work across all the different departments in terms of learning for the organisation. So what role do you think learning plays in supporting risk leaders better measure, manage and monitor risk in their own organisations? So all these core areas, how do we measure it, how do we manage it, and how do we monitor it?
But Grant, you know, we're in the, and it's a Gucci term to use, we're in the era of the polycrisis now, where, you know, the complexities are, it could be environmental, social and governance, as we know, it could be political, it could be any of the above, and also it could be internal challenges. So no matter how robust your culture is and how future-proof you think your controls are, you know, what you know that you're going to be exposed. And it's not a question of if, but when. And so the idea that learning has to now catch up effectively with individuals, whether it be the CRO or the head of risk within an organization or individual risk managers or risk owners at the first line, have to be able to understand how to balance and measure and understand all these disruptions to day-to-day life and to their day-to-day roles and how that impacts on them. So learning has to be much more agile, much more responsive, much more about just-in-time learning. It's not good enough to just to do, well, I did it last year or I did it 6 months ago. And so the way that organizations can respond through proactive learning, not reactive learning, is actually what's differentiating organizations who have got a robust culture and a robust attitude to risk. And I think that sinks in with what the expectation is in ISO 31000. And you led me onto this back in the day, which expects people to be competent in role, but also making sure that those components of competency are built in and embedded within the organization. And that can only happen when you have a continuous learning approach and a continuous improvement to learning, which is not one and done or just tick the box because you've done an IRM qualification. And I think this is a nod to my colleagues at the IRM here, that they've actually differentiated how you can jump into content in many different ways, in many different formats, through e-learning, through bite-sized learning, through qualifications, different levels of difficulty, different levels of content, and different levels of learning approaches. And that is what a robust, proactive curriculum looks like these days.
And a way to proactively identify this, is this through the risk assessments within the risk management system to sort of say, look, let's look at the risks of competency, of learning and environment, and actually trying to look at the individual. Do they do it to the detail where they're not just looking at the roles, but they're looking at the people that are in these roles as well, and then taking that journey down to that level of that individual person all the way through, and taking that journey with them at an individual level at every level of the organisation then?
Yeah, it's getting to the stage where, yeah, just like you say there, it's getting to the stage where where organisations are proactively managing their and assessing their people risk issue. So if you know the risk that your photocopier may have because you switched it on, because it's keyed into your wire, it's keyed into effectively it could be potentially breaching, or be a cyber hack waiting to happen through your photocopier, where hackers could get through the network via your photocopier. Is it fair to say that you should be able to understand what your people know or don't know, and how much robust or resilience is there within your people risk? And are you doing anything about that? So with the likes of technology that we have through AI now, we can anticipate, understand, and through predictive analytics, we know what people don't know. So we can actually see where the skeletons are in the closet before they even happened. It used to be retrospectively. We kept on looking, risk managers kept on looking in the rearview mirror about what risks have happened in their organizations and mopped up as it's gone along. But now we can anticipate where the issues and the challenges are going to happen. And therefore, we can proactively mitigate the risk using your risk profiling tools, using and understanding, AI, and using that to embed throughout the organization. We can identify people's gaps in their knowledge so they don't become an issue at all. So the manager can literally jump on a one-to-one coaching call or a one-to-one meeting and actually address that knowledge gap that could actually become a really big issue to the firm and also to the department.
Good. And when we first started, just building what you said there, when we first started out, we used to think about the 3 different styles of learning, kinesthetic, the different ways that people learned. Is that still something that's relevant? Still having to think about that, the different ways that maybe people like to be communicated with as well?
No, you've got kids. Yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting that you've got kids, I've got kids. I've got teenagers, and so my wife is a nerd, and we always talk about learning approaches and learning styles. Now, imagine this: they're going to university. My kids, they're learning how to learn. They're not even at university, so learning how to learn. So in the workplace, we've taken a traditional approach to learning. Now what we're doing is that Gen Z have actually expected learning in different ways. So when we actually use phones and when we use smartphones to actually reinforce learning, for example, or embed good practices of risk management practices, when we're looking at that and actually saying, well, look, what does push notifications look like to reinforce a compliance culture within our firms? We've got to be adopting these technologies because that's what our workforce have now trained and developed and actually been cultured in throughout schools, universities, and colleges. And I think that if we embed that, then we've got a chance of actually making sure that our firms have got the edge. If we ignore those things and we say, well, look, we're okay with doing the basics or the usual approaches to learning, then we're not adopting the technologies to actually meet the expectations of today's stakeholders, be it senior managers, be it customers, be it regulators.
So technology has a place, obviously, but the last question then is, what's the future for risk learning? Is it all about technology, or is it a balance between different things?
It's never about all technology, hopefully, because you and I won't be in a job. You won't be training, and I won't be doing what I'm doing. I think it's about a number of things. Yes, technology is a component, but I think personalized learning is absolutely critical. Yes, technology will help you personalize the learning and actually provide people with what they want to know and what they can apply. But I think there's a step change. We've got to rethink basically how we train risk leaders. It's no good just training them in the classroom. It's a start and you need the fundamentals. But I think that if you look at the likes of Harvard, Wharton, Yale, they're pushing the envelope in terms of like what good looks like there, in terms of like experiencing the learning, seeing what other firms are doing, and actually challenging your mindset. So you bring that back, embedding good risk practices back into your own organization. And also, I think what we're seeing is that the micro learning. So basically people choosing their content pathways or their learning pathways through an LMS or through an e-learning, which I know the IRM's got, picking and choosing the pathways so that they can understand where their journey takes them. So self-directed learning is the way forward. They're not a prescribed list of people saying that you have to do this, this, and this, but actually encouraging people to share ideas through an LMS system, but also making sure they're creating their own learning pathways. And finally, I think that you've got to know yourself. And that's where your risk profiling comes into it, is that you've got to know yourself so you're effective to yourself, but also to your organization. And if you don't have that self-awareness, you're always going to be on the back foot in terms of like your risk-based approach to key issues that are impacting and affecting the organization.
Good. Thank you for those insights. Any final thoughts or suggestions before we wrap up? It's been pretty comprehensive so far, but anything you want to say just to finish?
I would say that encourage, regardless of whether you're a CRO or whether you just dipping your toe in the risk management pool of talent and then starting your journey off. I say that upskilling and reskilling, those are the two buzzwords now. Many people in interviews are saying, well, what was the last thing you learned? Those are key entries. What are you doing to improve yourself? So they're looking for a commitment to learning, they're looking for an attitude to learning, and they're looking for what have you done recently? And so upskilling and reskilling. And if your firm offers that, happy days. If they don't, get yourself down to the IRM.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Phil. That's excellent. Thank you. We can go on and go into so many different areas, but we only had a very short time. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your insights. Thank you.